Welcome to Sola Church Online.
I'm Alan Rigg. This is my wife, Miranda Landers, and together we lead Sola Church, a hybrid church, digital plus micro.
And if you're wondering what is digital church, well, you are here right now with us having digital church. We put a new service up every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific time on our Church Online platform.
And then micro church, that's our small groups called life groups that meet during the week. We've got in-person groups and we've got online groups. We'll tell you more about that at the end of the service.
And I think you're going to enjoy the service today. Let's worship.
God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles, and every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. Open up the gates, make a way before the King of Kings. Our God who calls to save is here to set the captives free. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sins of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Every knee will bow before Him. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? 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 There is no one. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? Our In the darkness we were waiting, without hope, without light. To heaven you came running, there was mercy in your eyes. To fulfill the law and prophets, to a virgin came the word. From a throne of endless glory, to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not despise the cross. Up to the other side, knowing this was our salvation. Jesus, for our sake you died. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. On the morning that you rose, all of heaven held its breath, till that stone was moved for good, for the Lamb had conquered death. And the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe, for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored. And the church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By His blood and in His name, it is freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. Forever to the King of Kings.
This is that time in our service when we worship with our giving. If you're just checking us out today, please don't feel like you have to participate. But if Sola Church is your church home, or these online services have just been a blessing to you, it's super easy to make a one-time tax-deductible donation or even to schedule a recurring gift.
The easiest way is to scan the QR code on your screen. But you can always go to solachurch.life and click the tab at the top that says Give.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys so much for your generosity. Your giving makes it possible for us to create this digital content, to do our micro church gatherings, to do outreach. So thank you guys.
Let's get into our time of teaching.
Road rage. Like when everyone else on the freeway suddenly forgets how to drive. Tech rage, when your computer freezes right before you hit the save button. Sports rage, when the ref is clearly blind and the TV remote takes the hit. Phone rage, when autocorrect changes one thing to another thing and now you're in trouble. Customer service rage, when right? Yeah, you feel that? Like when your call is important to us has just become mockery. I mean, at this point, that's all it is. Parent rage. Why is it that kids can't hear you shout dinner time, but they can hear you open a piece of candy from 3 rooms away? Like, why does that happen? Grocery store rage, when 10 items or less requires a math degree to see how many items they actually have. Or airplane rage, when the person behind you thinks that your seat back is a punching bag. Oh man, it goes on and on. Like, no wonder social commentators describe this era as the age of rage. I was reading this week about what they call golf rage. That's when a person experiences rage on the golf course. Now when you're playing mini golf, you've got a problem if you're raging at a mini golf course. There is rap rage, something that we're all going to be dealing with in roughly 2 months. Yeah, rap rage. That's extreme anger caused by product packaging that you can't open, you can't get into. I have to admit, more than once in my life, I've gotten frustrated and grabbed a knife or something and gone at the packaging and ended up damaging the item inside. But it's so frustrating. And now they're talking about rage. That's anger directed at people who commit acts of rage. So if you're not mad, you're probably mad at someone who is. Well, the Bible has a lot to say about anger, and we're talking about it this weekend. So we're going to come to a verse in a moment where it says that Jesus looked around at the people around him with anger. Luke's account of the same incident says that those people around him were filled with rage. So we've got a lot to talk about in our time together today. Let's open to Mark chapter 3, or should I say, the gospel according to San Marcos. I just think it's so cool. Did you know that we live in a city named after the guy that wrote the book of Mark? Like, how awesome is that? San Marcos, St. Mark the Evangelist. It's a pretty cool thing. But the series we're calling Marked. And we're talking about how Jesus has marked us, and not just for ourselves, but to leave his mark on San Marcos and all of North County. So this series has been so fun already. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. Together, we're becoming unstoppable, unerasable, marked. And what we want to talk about today is being marked by control. Yeah, marked by control. So we're going to ask and answer several questions about anger. You ready? You guys ready for this? All right, so number one, what is anger? Look with me at Mark 3, beginning in verse 1. It says, "And he entered the synagogue again," Jesus did, "and a man was there who had a withered hand. So they watched him closely whether he would heal him on the Sabbath, so that they might accuse him. And when he said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Step forward,' then he said to him, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill?' But they kept silent. And when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, 'Stretch out your hand.' And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored as whole as the other. Then the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him." So you notice the reference to the synagogue in verse 1. That, of course, was a Jewish house of worship. And you see the reference to the Sabbath in verse 2. That was the Jewish day of worship. If it was the Sabbath, Jesus was at the synagogue. I love that. I love how he models that for us. And we talked a little bit about it last week, but this idea that, one day a week we would stop working and start worshiping, it made God's top 10 list. Exodus 20, verse 8, part of the 10 Commandments, it says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." But the question is how? How to keep it holy. So 2 verses later in Exodus 20, it says, "In it," that is the Sabbath, "you shall do no work," which raises another question. What is work? Define work. So later in that same book, like 14 chapters later, it defines work for us. It says, in plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. Okay, now we've got something specific. Now we can start our Sabbath not to do list. And the first thing that goes on that list, farming. No farming. Now, one chapter later, it says, you shall kindle no fire. So now we're going to continue our list. We're going to add to the not to do list, fire starting. No fire starting. Now, we talked about this last week. This is so human. This is so me. It's so you. It's so us that when we start a not to do list, we cannot stop. We just add to it and add to it and add to it. To the couple of things that God said about it, we inevitably are going to add many more things. In fact, the truth is that between the Old Testament and the New Testament, 39 tasks had been banned. So that list grew quite a bit, right? And on the not to do list was rendering aid. Like what? Rendering aid? On the not to do list? How could that possibly be? The rabbi said that unless it was a life-threatening emergency, you could not render aid without breaking the Sabbath. And that's why they watched him closely in verse 2. It's that spiritual voyeurism we talked about last week. They're voyeurs waiting for him to do something that they can accuse him of in verse 2. They wanted to accuse him of wrongdoing. So back again in verse 5, that key part, the key verse, when he had looked around at them with anger, being grieved by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. Now, we're not surprised to find the word anger in the text, but we're surprised to find the pronoun he. He was angry? Jesus? Angry? Like that can't be right. Now, admittedly, this is the only Bible verse that says that Jesus was angry. That doesn't mean that he was never angry before. And it doesn't mean that he was never angry again. But it means for sure that he was angry on this particular occasion. And this gives us the opportunity to talk about anger. What is anger? Maybe we should begin with a dictionary definition. That anger is a strong emotion, a feeling that is oriented towards some real or even supposed grievance. So anger as emotion, and it is, but it's more than that. Gary Chapman in his book, The Other Side of Love, writes, anger is a response to some event in life that causes us irritation, frustration, pain, or other displeasure. So we need to take just a moment. We don't always do this. But I think it would be helpful at this point to take just a moment to do a little bit of a word study. Let's talk about the Greek word translated anger in verse 5. It's used 36 times in the New Testament in this particular form. It's by far the most common, anger-related word in the New Testament. And this word speaks of a settled disposition. So you could think of that as something on the inside, something internal. Then another word that is used is the word wrath. It's used 18 times, half as many times in the New Testament, and it speaks of an outburst of the moment. So if anger is something on the inside, then wrath is something on the outside. It's external rather than internal. And then finally, there is the word rage. The word rage that was used in Luke's account of this same story. And it was used not for Jesus, but for, the others that were there that were a part of this situation. Again, used twice. And it's an interesting thing because it's a compound word. It's a noun that means mind with the negative article. So without mind or mindless or thoughtless or even out of one's mind. The one other time it's used in the New Testament, it's translated folly. All right, so just bank all of that for a minute. If you're talking about Bible verses that have to do with anger, probably the most important, if you could rank them that way, that's probably not the right way to say it, but the one that we see used the most frequently, the one that seems to carry the most weight, the one that seems to be the most accessible to us because it's found in both the Old Testament and the New, is Psalm 4, verse 4, where it says, be angry and do not sin. It's quoted by Paul in Ephesians 4, verse 26. But don't miss the point that we are told to be angry. Yeah, it goes on to say, do not sin. But first it says, be angry. You know, anger itself is not a sinful emotion. Not in and of itself. The question is, where is it leading us? You know, where are we going to take it? Where are we going to go with it? That's the question. Because unresolved anger turns into wrath. And when it does, it may even look like rage. It may even make us look foolish. It may make us look like fools. And there's this danger in life of being a low grader. Do you know what I mean by that? I'm talking about the kind of person that shows up angry. I mean, we think about our lives and we see angry people all the time. We see angry people in traffic. We see angry people in the office. We see angry people at home. We see angry people at church. We see angry people on the streets and on the freeways. We see angry people everywhere we go. They show up angry. They left the house angry, like they started their day angry. There's this low grade of anger. And so they're always just one thing away from the wrath and from the rage. One time I was seeing a movie in Austin, Texas. We're there in the movie theater, and about halfway through the film, like this wasn't 5 minutes in, this is halfway through, someone's cell phone rings. I mean, it's a bummer when that happens, but it does happen, right? Like, I mean, if somebody's cell phone goes off this morning, obviously, right now, if you haven't checked your phone, I'd appreciate it if you checked it. But if somebody's cell phone goes off, like, that's just life. Nobody's going to lose their mind. It's not the end of the world. And that's how you feel in a situation like the one I'm describing. But someone else in the theater made a comment loud enough for everyone in the theater to hear. And basically what they said is, no cell phones in the theater. Now they said it very much like I just said it. Like I tried my best to channel what they said and how they said it. It wasn't ugly. I felt in the moment like it was said about as sing-song and friendly and non-confrontational as it could have been said. But then we all heard the response, shut up. And I looked at the people with me and thought, we're going to be in one of those theater shootings. Like right now, like they're going to start shooting. The news is going to come. Like we're going to be on the news tonight. This is not good. I think it's safe to say the guy with the cell phone was a low grader. Like just that little bit of pushback, just that little bit of confrontation, and he was ready to throw down. It was crazy. But again, in your anger, do not sin. Jesus in his anger did not sin. We often do. And you know what happens when we go from anger to wrath? You know by experience, even if you've never really stopped to ponder it, you know that we have a physiological response. There are several key things that happen. The adrenal glands release hormones. Our heart rate goes up. Our blood pressure goes up. It affects our lung function. It even affects our digestive tract. That's really what we're describing when we say that we feel so angry that it's like an out of control feeling. That's the best way we can describe all those physiological changes that happen. And so Chapman says it is these physiological changes that give people the feeling of being overwhelmed by anger and being unable to control it. There it is in Chapman's words. So how much does it take for you to go to that place? Or how little? I read a story, another pastor told a story about how he'd found this restaurant, a breakfast restaurant that he loved. And the thing is that he's a waffle guy. For breakfast, he wants waffles. And this particular restaurant, which was definitely a breakfast place, it was called Egg Harbor, but they did not serve waffles. And so, like the first time he was there and they didn't see waffles on the menu, he made a joke trying to order waffles, and he thought it was cute. So the next time he came, he started off by asking if he could have waffles, and the time after that, and the time after that, and the time after that. Every time he had breakfast at this restaurant, he asked if he could have waffles, and every time they patiently told him no, until this time. This particular server who had heard this joke one time too many. We've all got friends like that, right? That just keep telling us the same joke that we really don't appreciate. And eventually you're thinking to yourself, that just gets funnier every time you say it. Well, it was a situation like that. And finally the server had it. She said, listen, waffle boy, That's good, man. Waffle boy. That's good. Listen, waffle boy, we don't have waffles. We didn't have waffles last week. We didn't have waffles 2 weeks ago. We don't have waffles today. We're never going to have waffles, ever. And then she went for the kill shot. Clue phone, hello. Oh, man. Well, maybe we could talk about, I don't know if you think, did that take a lot for her to go to that place, or did that only take a little for her to go to that place? I guess it depends on your perspective, but we could speak about our IQ, by which I mean our irritability quotient. If we have a low IQ, it takes a lot to set us off. But if we have a high IQ, it only takes a little to set us off. Do you find that you overreact to frustrations? Keeping it real, do you overreact to disappointments? Are you a low grader? Why is that? So marked by control, what anger is. Could we talk a little bit about why we get angry? Let's make that the next question. Why do we get angry? So back to verse 5. When he looked around at them with anger, being grieved, that is, by the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, stretch out your hand. So why do we get angry? Here's the first reason: because we're image bearers. The word anger is found 455 times in the Old Testament. That's a lot, right? But that's not even my point. My point is that of those, 375 are used of God. Think about that. The vast majority of references to anger in the Old Testament are about God being angry. That's crazy, right? Sort of counterintuitive, maybe. But here's the thing. All of God's qualities are linked together. He never has one without the other. We think about God and we don't think about anger, but we think about things like holiness and love, and that's exactly why God gets angry. Because he is holy, because he is loving. So when something happens that's unholy, his natural response to that is anger. When something happens that is unloving, his natural response to that is anger, because that's broken, that's harmful, that's not right. Chapman says that anger is God's logical response to injustice or unrighteousness, and in this case, to indifference. It made Jesus angry that these people, particularly because they were religious people, that they could be so indifferent to the suffering of others. And I just want to say to you today that if your life experience right now or at some point in the past is one where people, and maybe religious people in particular, have been indifferent to you or to your suffering, Jesus gets you. Jesus feels you. And he's right there with you in that. I love knowing that God is angry on my behalf if I suffer neglect or if I suffer abuse. But again, this idea of, being image bearers. In Genesis 1, verse 27, it says that God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. So we understand this to mean that we bear the imprint of God's image deep within our souls. If I'm being honest, there was a long time in my life, like many years in my early adulthood, where I never thought I was angry. And I think I thought that in part because it rarely, I shouldn't say never, but it rarely manifested as wrath or rage. And so I didn't label anger. It's not wrath, so I'm not angry. It's not rage, so I'm not angry. I didn't call it what it was. I didn't know what it was. I think part of the reason is because I'd been going to church. And I'd heard so many sermons, many of them good, that made good points, but that never talked about this side of it. Only about anger as a bad thing. Only about anger as something to be ashamed of. Only about anger as something to feel guilty about. Not as something that could teach us or could help us in some way. And so because I believed that it was wrong to be angry, and I didn't want to be wrong, and my anger didn't look like I thought anger looked because it wasn't wrath or rage, I didn't call it anger. But then over these last 20 years or so, I've started to realize that I was wrong, that I've often felt angry. And even when it didn't lead to wrath or to rage, it was anger that I was feeling. That thing that I was feeling has a name, and it's anger. Sometimes it's anger like that of Jesus. Sometimes it's anger on the behalf of other people. Sometimes it's anger because I see someone or something that's been neglected or that's been abused. But it was anger. I'm learning to recognize it. I'm learning to admit to others when I feel it. So why do we get angry? I said because we're image bearers. God gets angry. Why wouldn't we also experience that same reaction to things around us that are broken, that aren't right? But why do we get angry and then sin? Because we're fallen. And that's a concept that we could riff on for the next hour. So I'm just going to put it in a nutshell. You know, when you're in church and someone talks about the fall or about humanity as being fallen, what we're talking about is how because of the first sin, the first man, the first woman, because of the sin at the beginning, we are all born in a state, a spiritual state that we could call fallen. It's one where we have a sinful nature. We have a bent towards sin. We are sinners by nature and we're sinners by choice. Even though most of us don't like that label sinner, and it's not one that we would ever use to hurt people, but about ourselves, it's helpful to realize that no one's perfect. And that's all it means. A sinner, that's someone who's not perfect. I'm not perfect. So that's what I mean by fallen. So we sin because we get angry because we're made in the image of God, but we get angry and we sin because we're fallen, which as it relates to the image of God, it means that image in us is not erased because of sin, but it is marred. Let's explore that. In verse 6, the Pharisees went out and immediately plotted with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. Now, this is interesting to explore the Pharisees, who we saw already were dealing with rage. Maybe you've heard this saying that anger is the second emotion. Have you heard that? When you and I feel anger, that's rarely the primary thing that we're feeling. But it comes right on the heels of something else. And it's so overwhelming, it's so much bigger than that first thing, that it covers the first thing. We may not even be aware of the first thing, which creates lots of difficulty for us in knowing how to navigate this stuff in our lives. The idea is that it diverts our attention away from that prior, more basic thing, which is very often something like hurt, frustration, fear. The rage of the Pharisees, what was it linked to? Well, later in Mark's gospel in chapter 15, we'll find out when the plot that is hatched here in chapter 3 to destroy Jesus, when that plot comes to fruition in chapter 15, it tells us that they did what they did because of envy. So underneath this rage were these feelings of envy. To put that in the hurt, frustration, fear, loop, we could think about it like this. Maybe they were hurt because Jesus hadn't sought their approval, or because people were now following him instead of them. Maybe they were frustrated because of their inability to maintain their influence. Maybe they were afraid that they would never be able to regain the power, the prestige, the position that they've lost because of Jesus' growing popularity. So what they needed to do, and what you and I need to do, is we need to ID the emotion that anger covers. The next time you feel angry, the next time I feel angry, we could ask ourselves questions like these. Try this. You're angry and you're not sure what the first emotion is. So try this. I feel hurt by, and see if you can fill in the blank. Or try this question. I feel frustrated because, and see if you can fill in the blank. Or try this question. I feel afraid when, and see if you could fill in the blank. It could be that you'll discover, well, yeah, I'm angry, but behind that or under that or prior to that, at the heart or the root of that is, I feel hurt because I've been joked about or teased, or I feel frustrated because I'm talking to someone and they don't acknowledge me or don't answer me, or I feel afraid when my spouse forgets things that are important to our family, or whatever it might be. And as long as we don't ask those questions and peel back the anger layer to see what's underneath it, we're never going to resolve anger. At best, we're going to manage it, or maybe not. So marked by control, what anger is, why we get angry. Can we tackle one more question? Let's tackle how can we handle our anger. Let's go back to verses 3 and 4. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, step forward. Then he said to them, is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? But they kept silent. Now, I remember many years ago when I was in my 20s, early 20s, I think, I interviewed for a job at a Catholic hospital. And the woman who did the interview, she was an elderly woman. She obviously had lots of experience, on the job. She'd probably been at this hospital for many, many, many years. And she asked me how I felt about working on Sundays. Well, I wasn't excited about it because I was really involved in my church and I wanted to remain involved in my church. I hope to attend on Sunday mornings and continue serving like I was at that time. And so, I shared with her that would be my desire. And she answered very kindly and she said, well, if the good Lord didn't want us to work at this hospital on Sundays, he wouldn't let people get sick on Sundays. And I thought, yeah, I could use some of that common sense. I could use some of that wisdom in my life. Like, could I just borrow some of that wisdom that comes with life experience? Like, that's really good. Jesus might have said, look, as long as, withered hands don't take the day off, why should the healer of withered hands? Or Jesus might have said, bad stuff doesn't stop happening on the Sabbath, so why should good stuff not be allowed to happen? I mean, maybe Jesus could have posed a question like this. Maybe he could have said, okay, if this is the day to stop working and start worshiping, and it is, then would this be a good day to help people or to hurt them? And just see what their answer would be, right? Like what would they say about that? James 4 verse 17 says, to him who knows to do good and does not do it, to him it is sin. Like a sin of omission. Not doing the wrong thing, but failing to do the right thing. And may I just say, can I just make this observation quickly? When our understanding of a Bible verse or a Bible story would lead us to neglect people, our understanding is certainly wrong. If my takeaway from a particular Bible verse is to neglect or abuse or to hurt people, my understanding could not possibly be right. And you notice it says that they kept silent. I wonder how you are, how we are when it comes to handling anger. Like if you were a household appliance or fixture or furnishing, which one would you be? I think these guys in the story, I think they were like a freezer with their anger. Because they gave Jesus the cold shoulder. They answered nothing. They gave him the cold shoulder. They gave him the silent treatment. They just shut him out. They just shut it down. So they were like freezers. But what are you like? Like some of us, I think, are like trash compactors. We just try to repress our anger. We keep stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it. The problem is it's toxic. And it's definitely going to catch up to us. Others of us are like a clothes washer. We're not necessarily trying to repress anger, but we're certainly in some way trying to suppress anger. Maybe like a washer, a trash compactor does nothing to transform the trash into something better. A washer is trying to wash the clothes, and maybe we feel like we're kind of doing our washer thing to some extent, but we just keep putting more in there and more in there until it overflows. And then maybe others of us are like a microwave. Yeah, we don't try to repress anger and we don't try to suppress anger. We just express it. Are you that person? You just express your anger. Maybe you've been in the office one day when somebody like brought some pasta for lunch and they put it in the microwave and they left the microwave on too long. They opened the door to the microwave. Where's the pasta? Well, it's up here, and it's over here, and it's even on the inside of the door, like it's everywhere except the container that you brought it in. That's where it is. And some of us are like that, like we just explode. So here quickly are 3 things that I want to recommend. Wherever you fall in that, whether you're the freezer, the trash compactor, the clothes washer, the microwave, here's 3 things we can do to handle anger. If you're taking notes, jot it down. Number 1, take responsibility. This is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm committing to doing, is to take responsibility. We control anger, or anger controls us. Have you ever said to somebody, "You make me so mad"? Have you ever said that? You probably have. Or someone said it to you. So check this out. No one can make you mad. No one. No one can make me mad. We could look at this another way. Have you ever said something like, "They really press my buttons. They really push my buttons"? You ever said that? Well, yeah, sometimes people do that. Sometimes, people who know us well, they know where our sensitive spots are, and if they deliberately go there just to be hurtful, yeah, that's really unpleasant. But before we excuse ourselves, before we excuse our wrath and our rage by saying, "Well, they pressed my button," whose button is it? It's your button. Or mine. It's my button. And I choose how I react and how I respond, no matter how much button pushing happens. I've got to take responsibility for my buttons. You've got to take responsibility for yours. Some of us, have been grown way too long to not be taking responsibility for our buttons. Number 2, if you're writing it down, see opportunity. Emotional pain is not entirely different than physical pain. We need physical pain. If you didn't experience physical pain, you would be in great danger. Study leprosy in Bible times. Get a Bible dictionary and open it to the L's and find the entry for leprosy. And you'll probably find some old picture of, someone with leprosy who is missing digits and so forth. And you see that and you think, "Oh, that's terrible." But we have this idea in our minds that like their digits or their limbs just rotted and fell off. They didn't. That isn't normally how it happens. What happens is that the nerve endings aren't working correctly. They don't feel pain. Imagine if I didn't feel pain in this hand, and imagine if this tabletop was a grill, and as I'm talking, I came over here and I put my weight on this hand. It might be a while before I realized that my hand was being severely injured. And so that's what would happen to these lepers. They because they didn't feel pain, they were way more likely to be injured. There are actually stories of lepers who would wake up at night to discover that their extremities were being gnawed on by rats, and so getting pet cats to deal with the rats while they slept. I know, you're like, "Well, thank you for that image." I know, I'm sorry. But spiritually speaking and emotionally speaking, we need pain. In this case, we need anger. Without this and other emotions, we would be in great danger. We need emotions to alert us to the fact that something was wrong. And so that's why I say that we need to see this as an opportunity. If it weren't for anger, we might never see the difference between the way things are and the way they could be. Anger is what tells me this relationship could be so much more. Anger is what tells me this workplace could be so much healthier. Anger is what tells me that, this world in which I live could be so much different and so much more life-giving than it is. Anger is what tells me that and alerts me to that. So we want to see the opportunity to make things better. And then number 3, act constructively. I hope that you're jotting these down or will remember them. Take responsibility, see opportunity, act constructively. To be destructive is to allow anger to remain unresolved, risking wrath and rage. To be constructive is to take courageous steps to resolve anger, avoiding wrath and rage. How did Jesus practice this? Well, he actually practiced this in a very simple way. Rather than continuing dealing with the neglectful people, he turned his attention to the person who had been neglected, and he did something kind for them. And we have the opportunity to act constructively and to put some good into the universe. Where we see an injustice, where we see oppression, where we see abuse, where we see neglect, we have the opportunity to do that kind thing, that generous thing, that loving thing, that selfless thing that brings the smallest bit of incremental change, but taken together begins to make a huge difference. Marked by control. We talked about what anger is, why we get angry, and how we can handle it. What I want to suggest, and then I'm going to pray, is that in the days ahead, when we feel angry, we learn to sit with our anger. When I say that, I'm not talking about tolerating our wrath. I'm not talking about making space for our rage, but I am talking about sitting with our anger. We need to sit with it. We need to listen to it. We need to learn from it. And then we need to be led into a helpful place rather than a harmful place. If there's any part of you that feels like you can't do it, consider this. Jesus told a guy with a non-functional hand to stretch forth his hand. He couldn't do that. Or could he? He could, and he did. And you and I, can we take responsibility? We can, and we will. Can we see opportunity? We can, and we will. Can we act constructively? We can, and we will. And Father, we pray that you will help us to do that. Lord, for some of us, this might be a really present struggle. Like we might be battling with it right now in our lives. And I just pray, Lord, that you would help us in this season, in this moment, to take these lessons to heart and to begin to think in new ways about anger. And like we talked about, to sit with it, to learn from it, to listen to it. And Lord, to be led into this better place where we're closer to you, where we're becoming more and more the women and the men that you're making us, where we're like Jesus, we're the ones that are putting some good into the bad situation that maybe we find ourselves in. Lord, would you help us to do that for your glory and for our good? In the name of your Son, Jesus, we pray. Amen.
And now it's time to fill out a Connect card.
Yeah, just go to our website, solidchurch.life, and scroll to the bottom of the homepage, letting us know that you watched today, but also you can request information there about our small groups. And there is actually a lot more information on the website about those. At the top, if you click where it says Gather, you'll find information about all of our groups. An in-person group on Tuesday on the west side, an online group on Wednesday, another in-person group on Thursday on the west side. So check it out, find the time, the date, the location that works best for you, and join us for Sola Micro Church.
And don't forget, go and follow Sola Church on social media.
Yep, at Sola Church LA on all your favorite platforms.
And we hope that everyone has a great week. And we will see you next time at Sola Church Online.
Bye, everybody.